Hello, thank you for coming to episode 16 to the Senior Spotlight. I'm Mary Cordova with Concierge Care Advisors. I'm one of the co-founders. We help seniors stay in their home safely or make a transition. Today, I am privileged to be here with two of our doctors from our Physician Advisory Board, Dr. Ferris and Dr. Moraes. Thank you for coming today,
Happy New
doctors.
Year.
Happy New Year. We're
Hi.
excited. And today we're going to be talking about managing caregiver stress and burnout. So I think this is obviously applicable for the new year. People are feeling overwhelmed, stressed. If you're a caregiver at home, maybe you hadn't got out during the holiday. You're providing full-time care for maybe your husband or vice versa for your wife. And just really wanting to talk about some common signs of caregiver stress and burnout and things that we can help share with them. Dr. Ferris, if you can explain the emotional and physical effects on caregiving and mentally on how that affects people, that would be helpful. And then I'll have another question for you, Dr. Moraes.
Well, I can cut right to the chase. I think it can be wrecking to the individual. In the success stories that I've seen in my practice, I think that from a family perspective, it's when the earlier the topic is discussed and discussed as adults, all adults, when it includes the grown children, the better off they do. The better prepared they are. I think when it's a verboten topic, or one individual takes it on, I think it's much, much higher risk for unintended consequences that aren't necessarily very good.
And what we see is usually the well spouse is the one that we see in the hospital. Maybe they might have had a stroke. They may have had a heart attack. Maybe they had a fall and they were the caregiver. We get that all the time. My mom was the caregiver for dad. Dad has dementia. Mom took a fall and broke her hip, and now we don't know what to do. When one person takes that on, it can be so overwhelming. And I think talking about it's okay to feel overwhelmed when you're taking care of your husband or your spouse or your mom or your dad. And, raising your hand up to say, I can't do this anymore. And bringing it to, we often will talk to spouses, and when they reach out, it's due to anger. It's like, I feel guilty because now I'm yelling at my husband. And I really think that that's really important to talk about the stress of being a caregiver, getting that respite to come in to relieve you, maybe once a week, so you can step away from, your loved one if you're doing all of the work. I think that's just huge for the loved one to know it's okay and to step away.
It's in many ways the curse of being there all the time is that it always becomes their new normal.
Yeah.
And they don't see the big change where they step out of it.
Right.
And so it's very common that I've seen is then somebody comes into the picture who wasn't and says, oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know you were doing all this.
And it's so easy, and there's nothing wrong with that. They just lose the scope. I don't want to say perspective. They lose the scope of what's happening and has happened, and what they've done with good intention.
Absolutely.
But dire consequence.
Absolutely.
And it happens over and over again.
Yeah. And I think we adult children a lot of times will say, I promised my dad that he would never have to move from their house. And I often will say, well, your dad probably did not know it was going to be $35,000 a month to keep him at home with 24/7 care in 2025.
Right.
So if your dad was alert and oriented and you told him that you're keeping him home at $30,000 a month, I think he would tell you, move me, you know?
It's an encouragement for families to look at aging to include a safe word.
Yeah, exactly. Don't ever make those promises you can't keep. And if you're not sure, absolutely. I think that is, I was
To
blessed.
say it's time.
It's time. I have 10 brothers and sisters. My dad, aged through the whole process at home. My mom's hoping to do the same at 88. But not everyone has an army
Yay,
to take
Mom.
care of. And she's living alone independently.
It does take a village.
It takes a village. But like I tell people when I go out and we do a lot of speaking events, and it's called Get Your Ducks in a Row. And that's what I tell people. Not everybody has an army of 10 kids to take care of them.
Or 10 ducks.
Or 10 ducks. So get them in a row and be mindful of what your capabilities are. But I think for caregiver stress is so huge. And having those conversations as you're setting up, not when you're in crisis, but you know what, Mom, I'm going to make sure that I'm here every Wednesday to give you a break.
But in my experience, and I think Alex should chime in as well, because the three of us are all looking at the same problem from different points on the circle.
Absolutely.
Well, no, I think it's the same. I think we're on the same circle. We're just on different parts of that circle looking at the same problem. For me, the observation has been it's a minority event for that to have happened. And I don't think it's dependent on how many kids they have. I think there's a lot of other influences. I don't know.
Well, first of all, I'd like to know how you guys can get 10 ducks in a row, because I've never been able to.
Not very many people can.
You need a different guide.
I probably do. By the time I'd be done, I only had 1 or 2, 3 ducks, though. So I have this conversation frequently in my office. I'm fortunate that through hospice we have our social workers and our chaplains that have this conversation. But one of the things that we don't bring to the office in most instances is the financial piece.
Yeah.
Because I will many times sit down with my clients and say, okay, I need to have an understanding of what your finances are for me to be able to help you, right?
I wish more doctors would do that, because so many doctors give advice not knowing the finances.
Exactly.
Oh,
But they're not trained. We're not trained.
We're not trained to do this.
but you shouldn't. Excuse me. They shouldn't give out that kind of advice, not knowing the detriment that they're putting their patients in, knowing that it's 35 grand a month.
Yeah, but we're fixers. We fix everything.
Which then gets very interesting, because then you start talking about siloing people. You start stereotyping.
Yeah.
But let me get to my what
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
going to
yeah.
say real quick. What
Yeah.
happens is that many times we don't know the audience, and we
Right,
think the
right.
audience is the
Exactly.
patient, and the audience isn't the patient; it's the family
It's a
member.
family member.
So sitting down and saying, okay, show me your finances, or let's be honest with me with your finances.
Right.
Do you have $1? I can help you in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have $50,000? That's a different process.
Right.
Do you have $20 million? That's, if we were all so lucky, that's a
Right.
different process too, right?
Right.
But that helps me guide your care, because the spouse
Exactly.
should never be the caregiver, because now you begin to, most people aren't going to believe what I'm going to say, they begin to dislike their spouse.
And resent.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Can't leave the house.
They still love them, but
Yeah.
they just don't like them anymore.
Absolutely.
And when that relationship changes, they get back to being that person who cares for them but doesn't have to care for them. So there's a difference.
Exactly.
And but I think we need to understand what the finances are and who our client is at that time,
At that
because
time, I love
again,
that.
many times it's not the patient anymore.
Absolutely.
Well, it goes back to the very beginning for all of us, which is that part influences our job from a health perspective,
Mm-hmm.
from your perspective, and most importantly, from that individual and their family's perspective, because that's what they're all thinking.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And the physician is seen as a trusted resource.
Mm-hmm.
And one reason I came on board as a physician advisor for Concierge Care Advisors is, number one, I felt that you were an advocate for the patient and the family, and there's many times you provide services without receiving
Fee.
a fee,
Yep.
right? And what you're trying to do is place them in the best place, because if you do that, then the circle continues.
Absolutely.
But ultimately, you're helping your clients, whoever your clients may be, and that's really important. I was going to get to a point now and I forgot, so I may need to eat and exercise better here. Or I'm going to forget. But, ultimately, I think you just have to care for the person at hand and don't be the caregiver. Oh, I know what I was going to say. One thing people don't realize is that they shouldn't sign anything for family members if they're not directly responsible for them financially, because it can put them on a hook for a number of things. So you think you're being nice and you sign a form for them to go into a nursing home, or you sign a form for some power of attorney thing. It can change how you're viewed legally from the financial perspective of who's now responsible.
Right.
And what you've done too is you've removed the capability of that person to receive services that they could have gotten because they may have been low income.
Got it. Now you're being financially responsible.
Now you're financially responsible, and they can't get services, so now they're stuck.
You have to recognize best intentions have to remain, but have to be understood that you are in a system that you may not have experience. Your intuition probably won't help you
get you there.
Right.
Yep.
You have to ask for advice to understand that there are steps. There's a structure that can help, that is designed to help, but if you don't engage it right, is not necessarily forgiving.
Yeah, and don't sign anything. Even in the ER, they can't turn you away. If you take your parents there and they say, "Are you going to be responsible for their stay?" No, they have insurance, right?
Yeah.
Because now you're on the hook.
Right.
Or can be on the hook. It depends on the state.
Good point. And that helps with bringing down caregiver stress. That's for sure. Yeah. What are some other coping mechanisms for managing stress? What I have is a respite. You can do a short-term respite stay. And have a relief. Maybe take a vacation for a week and have your loved one go to an assisted living or an adult family home for a week. Respite is not, it's very underutilized.
Because it's not known.
It's not known. And also Medicaid, people that are on COPES can have a respite time through the government that they pay for. So a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned no signing. And then you were telling me today that Washington, I'm a California resident, but Washington pays into a retirement.
Long-term care.
Long-term care fund.
Right. It's a relatively new legislation that went into effect in terms of a tax, and so we won't
pay
really
into it.
Right.
Yeah.
But we won't really see the consequences of that for a while. But in terms of, again, the system begins at even an earlier planning level, not just for long-term care insurance, but when you're at the Medicare age and you get a supplement, if you can get a supplement, there's different levels of what those supplements are. I believe it's all labeled through the alphabet, that have different amount of services that will kick in. And I think the average awareness is pretty low.
Yep, absolutely.
Is pretty darn low.
Yeah, we try to share that every chance we get, because we know the caregiver stress and burnout can be absolutely out of this world. And all patients obviously need somebody to be kind to them, and not that a spouse, like you said, you get to a point where you're resenting and you're not getting any relief. That's not what you signed up for with marriage. So obviously self-care is so important for the well spouse, whoever's doing the caregiving. When you find yourself being a short-tempered, get somebody else in there to love on that person while you just might need a couple days to get some respite. Any other tips before we close this podcast on caregiving stress?
Check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It takes a village.
Yeah, it takes a village.
It really does.
Don't be shy to ask for help, a neighbor, a friend, a church. So again, thank you so much for coming to the episode 16 to Managing Caregiver Stress. In 2025, if you're finding yourself stressful taking care of a loved one at home, please reach out to Concierge Care Advisors. You can find us at www.conciergecareadvisors.com. caregiveradvisors.com. We can help you with respite. We can help with in-home care, anything senior. Thank you again. Happy 2025. And doctors, thank you again for your time today.
My pleasure.
Well,
You guys are
thanks.
great. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
what
Thank
you
you.
do.
Thank you so much.
Yay.